I'm Karina Neighbour and this is the AV Experience, a podcast brought to you by Optoma. On this special episode, we are joined by Optoma's Chief Technology Officer, Justin Halls. Justin has been with Optoma for the past 15 years and has seen the brand adapt and innovate in the ever-evolving world of technology and AV. He reveals how he started his journey into AV, the history of Optoma, and what lies ahead for the leading AV manufacturer. I started by asking Justin, what exactly does a Chief Technology Officer do?
Hi Karina, thanks for having me. The CTO, or Chief Technology Officer, to give it its rather grand title, just means the person who looks after how technology is used in an organisation for the organisation's benefit. In the same way that a Chief Financial Officer looks after the money and makes sure we do sensible things with it, so a CTO looks after the technology. This means everything from how we can use the technology inside our organisation to make systems and processes more efficient, to making sure our new products use technology in the best way to benefit our customers.
In what capacity did you join Optoma, and what was it about the brand that appealed to you?
I joined Optoma as a product manager, though at the time it was a very small organisation. The whole of Optoma EMEA, around 15 people, were squashed into one room, and in a good month we might sell 100 projectors. So everybody had to muck in and everybody did every job, and the boundaries were very blurred. For example, at the end of the month, everybody would be in the warehouse labelling projectors and making sure that they shipped on time. I was attracted to Optoma firstly and most importantly because they had cool toys I wanted to play with, and because the technology the tools were based on, which was DLP, was new and exciting, and secondly because they were a small organisation that had big ambitions, and I liked the idea of being part of a small team where everybody can make their contribution and make a difference.
And how did your journey into AV begin?
That was a long journey into AV, but it started with a telling off from a sixth form teacher. I was being reprimanded for being late in the morning registration session. Again, the rant turned to, what was I going to do with my life? And if I didn't know, how could I expect to achieve it? This did seem a lot to put on a 16-year-old first thing in the morning. I had no clue what I wanted to do or where I was going. I hadn't really given it a moment's thought. It did, however, start me thinking. A couple of days later, it was sorted. I was going to be an airline pilot. Job done. I spoke to my teacher and told him he didn't need to worry anymore. I was going to be a pilot. His response wasn't what I expected. He told me that being a pilot is pretty much the same thing as being a bus driver, and I'd find it really boring. He knew that I was quite a keen musician playing multiple instruments, and the only subject I seemed interested in at school was electronics. Then, in a genius move really, he suggested that I combine the two and be one of those engineers that sits behind the big desk with loads of knobs and buttons and records musicians. It seemed like a good idea, but I wasn't really convinced. A while later, a touring band visited our college, and during the day they were setting up their equipment in the school hall ready for a concert in the evening. I watched the technician unpack the audio mixing desk, and sure enough it had more knobs, buttons and sliders and flashing lights than I'd ever seen before. I was sold. I was going to do that job and be the guy that got to play with all those toys. Whilst I was at college, I got a part-time job at a local recording studio, and for the next 2 years spent more time at the studio than at college, often working in the studio until 4 a.m, then getting up to go to college at 7 a.m. I spent most of my time in college asleep in the library, but somehow managed to pass the course. From there I spent a few wonderful years working full-time as an audio engineer in the recording studio, until unfortunately the studio went bankrupt. I lost my job and I had to decide on my next step. The temptation was to get another job in another studio, but I'd become uneasy that at the studio I was surrounded in electronic equipment, but I didn't really know how any of it worked. I felt I should find out, so I went to uni and studied electronics. My plan was to finish the electronics course, then go back to studio work, but that didn't happen. At uni, I met a couple of people who became lifelong friends. One had decided to study electronics because he wanted to make a surround sound processor for live events, so that the music could come from all around the audience rather than just from the stage. A similar concept really to surround sound setup that you might have at home as part of your home cinema, but on a much bigger scale. He told me how he was going to do it, and being a rather cocky young man, I guess, I told him he was doing it all wrong and I knew a much better way to do it. It turned out I didn't, but we spent all my time at uni working on that product together. Word got out in the industry of what we were working on, and we ended up demonstrating it to a few bands, amongst them Pink Floyd and Prince. Then it ended up being used by Peter Gabriel for the show at the Millennium Dome in London. That show had nearly 1,000 performances during the year 2000 and was seen by millions. Not bad, really, as an achievement for a side project for a couple of students doing their studies. It was whilst working on that project that I first became aware of the internet, which at the time was a weird technology exclusively for computer geeks. I got quite interested in it and hand-coded a web page for that surround sound product using a text editor. At the time, there weren't any tools to make web pages. I remember being really excited about the internet, showing it to all my friends and telling them it could be really big one day. But as they sat there watching Prince's web page take 1 minute to download by line and the images pixel by pixel, they weren't really convinced. I was. And when I finished uni, I got a job as a product manager for a company that manufactured modems. Modems were these things used to connect computers together over telephone lines and later to connect to that newfangled internet thing. Funnily, my first job at the company was to try and convince the boss that it really would be a good idea to get another newfangled thing for the company, email. He really couldn't see the point. They already had 2 fax machines. Why did they need this email thing? Well, eventually he relented when I said I could use one of the company's old computers and do the installation and set up for nothing. Shortly after, everybody realised how useful the internet could be, and working for one of the companies that was making it all possible was a pretty exciting place to be. However, technology moves on, and after a few years, the modems that we had made started to be integrated into the chipsets of motherboards, and our modems weren't required anymore. This was when I started to get into the video part of audiovisual. Instead of modems, we started making TV tuner cards for computers. At the time, this was a pretty amazing concept, being able to watch and record TV on your computer. Again, business was good for a few years, and then, again, things moved on and people started using set-top boxes to watch and record TV. From my work with TV cards, I learned a lot about digital video and video processing, and I was looking for somewhere I could put those skills to good use. I'd seen some digital projection technology and was interested in what it could do. Then I came across Optoma and it all started to fall into place.
For those who may not know, the DLP, or digital light processor chip, is the digital sorcery behind Optoma's projectors. It was invented in 1987 by Larry Hornbeck at the same Texas Instruments which brought us the TI-82 calculator. In DLP projectors, the image is created using microscopically small mirrors laid out on a semiconductor chip, known as a digital micromirror device, or a DMD for short. Optoma was born out of its parent company, Coretronic. Coretronic is one of the largest manufacturers of DLP projection in the world. I asked Justin about the eventful history which has led us from specialising in projection to becoming a one-stop shop of big image solutions.
Optoma was founded when Coretronic, our Taiwanese parent company, decided that they wanted to establish their own brand for the projector product Coretronic was manufacturing. Before Optoma, Coretronic was exclusively an OEM projector manufacturer, manufacturing for other brands. Nothing had their own name on it. The idea for Optoma was to create a brand and create value for that brand. In the beginning, that value was in Optoma's reputation for reliable products with a good cost-performance ratio. For example, if you bought an Optoma projector, it would cost less than a big brand like Panasonic or Sony, but the performance would be equal or better, and it'd be cheaper, so you got good bang for your buck. I think actually we've held on to that philosophy, but it's become a bit more refined as we've developed as a company.
I'm guessing the shift from analogue to digital had a massive impact on us.
Yes, a huge impact on us. In fact, it's the reason for our existence. We started selling projectors based on a new technology called digital light processing. Before projectors were digital, they used cathode ray tubes like old CRT TVs. DLP was one of the 2 digital projection technologies that killed analog projectors stone dead.
What would you say has been your proudest moment at Optoma?
Every couple of years I have a new proudest moment for Optoma. The first rear projection TV, the first 1080p home cinema projector, the first all-in-one DVD projector and sound system, the first laser LED hybrid projector, our dual-core laser technology, and then the end of our projector-only era with the introduction of LED and IFP displays. But I think probably the proudest moment is when we beat Apple's iPhone to be voted by Time magazine as the gadget of the year with our first battery-powered Pico pocket projector.
Where do you see the future of AV going?
Well, I'm looking forward to holodecks and interfacing directly with our visual cortex, so we don't need any display products. But seriously, LED pixel pitches will get smaller, micro LED will enter the mainstream, OLED displays will continue to get bigger and become flexible like a projector screen, but you won't need a projector, the image will come from the screen. IFPs will get bigger and cheaper. Eventually projectors will be used for very big images using blending, or very small images like Pico or ultra portable projectors, and for creative applications like projector mapping. Augmented reality displays will become usable, and real volumetric holographic displays will happen. Beyond that, I've absolutely no idea.
If you could sum it up in one word, how is the future looking for Optoma now?
One word. Bright. Yeah, corny, I guess, but I think it's true. I'm confident, and I think we're ready for whatever the future brings. We've got a great team.
How can people get in touch with you and find out more about anything you're up to?
Well, for people outside Optoma, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, and always up for a techie chat, so get in touch.
Thank you, Justin, for sharing your AV experience with us. You've been listening to the AV Experience, brought to you by Optoma. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, or would even like to feature, please visit optoma.com for more details. I'm Karina, this is the AV Experience. Catch you in the ether.